Hello everybody and welcome back to another brand new video, my second of the day, as hopefully you've seen. If not, please do check out the video I did earlier, which is all about the fact that Series 13 is going to be airing this year and the kind of positive aspects to that, and also my thoughts on the announcement that John Bishop is going to be a companion for Series 13 as well. So if you haven't already, go check that out. But now, of course, we're going to have a proper in-depth little look at Revolution of the Daleks. So yeah, we've had 24 hours to let the dust settle a little bit and have a little bit more of a think about this story, think about what worked, what didn't, where, just kind of analysing it a little bit more. And so this video is just going to be a little bit more of a look at that, kind of walk through the story, look at what things I think were quite effective, quite worked, whether they're characters that work better or worse than others, some of the plot aspects, the emotive scenes, just generally my kind of overall more in-depth discussion and thoughts on this story. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments, guys, so please, if you've got your kind of short review of the story, what you think of different aspects of it, please do post them in the comments below. I'd love to read them and reply to a few of you guys and have a little discussion about it all, because I think it's really, really interesting. So we might as well start from the beginning with Revolution of the Daleks, go back to the beginning of the story, which essentially was a kind of recap of Resolution, and linking the story really nicely back into the Newsday special from a couple of years ago. I really like that aspect of kind of just using this as almost a kind of a sequel to Resolution, utilising the aspects that we kind of just wouldn't think about, forgotten about. Like, you'd never think, oh wait, there was a smashed up Dalek casing in GCHQ. That's just, you just wouldn't think about it. It's those sort of classic like Doctor Who things that it's just kind of left and forgotten, and you can write a fan fiction about it if you want, but it's not important. And so I love that they actually suddenly gave that some importance, that actually it kind of was the beginnings of an even greater Dalek invasion and Dalek problems was off the back of one destroyed Dalek from an episode 2 years ago. I thought that was a really just effective sort of narrative link to be able to give it, and a real kind of just a good way to start the story off, I think. So there's early scenes where we saw the Resolution Dalek that was inside the lorry being sort of driven along, and then that slightly odd scene where Fee's Tease, her sort of mini cafe thing, she suddenly poisons this dude and then steals the Dalek, and then we never see her again. And I guess she's some sort of special agent working with sort of Robertson or Leo or whoever was kind of behind it, sort of. But it was a little bit bizarre. It was kind of a little bit confusing to quite understand exactly what was going on to an extent. But it was nice to then see the reintroduction of Jack Robertson as well, and see him with who would be the future Prime Minister, along with Leo Ragazzi, as they kind of come up with this idea for the new, what they thought was just called a defence drone. And really quite effective sort of little scene showing off like a test of what they want to utilise it for, basically, giving it a water cannon and a sort of gas sprayer, basically, to be able to clear crowds, or a high-pitched noise as well. And so it was sort of subverted our expectations almost, I think. You're expecting when you see a Dalek to see a massive gun, sort of laser gun thing, but it wasn't that at all, and I just found that was quite a good moment that I wasn't really expecting. Sort of, although we knew that they were going to be in this and be these defence drones, I still thought they'd probably have like a Dalek gun or something, but no, it was just a water cannon. I thought that was a really clever idea. So that was a kind of nice way to initially set up the story, introduce the main characters for the kind of big plot line, I guess, of this story. And I guess let's just focus on that actual plot for a minute, which is the whole Revolution, sort of recreating Daleks based off that original Dalek, sort of using that casing to create a load of new ones that are going to be defence drones to basically just help some political ambitions and make a bit of money. It's probably all really that Robertson and then the future Prime Minister who became Prime Minister was actually aiming for. It was a little bit sort of controlling, and she was a bit of a dodgy woman, shall we say, as a Prime Minister, and introducing these en masse instantly, and then not being able to control them as they obviously turn into real Daleks and kill everybody. But I thought that was quite a nice idea to utilise that I don't think we've seen too much in Doctor Who before. You certainly not of like people actually choosing to create their own Daleks. I think that was quite a cool idea. That initially were just literally just sort of 3D printed shapes as Jack Robertson described, and they literally were just kind of units that did stuff. They weren't in live or had any robotic, really, even robots particularly. They were just defence drones, as they were called. And so I quite like that. And then obviously the plot kind of goes on to focus more on the kind of classic Dalek purity idea, and these are impure Daleks, we must destroy them, even though it probably would have worked better to their advantage to work with these Daleks if they wanted to actually utilise them to take over the Earth. It wasn't quite clear through the story whether they actually wanted to take over the Earth or not. I think certainly the defence drone Daleks wanted to take over the Earth once the Dalek mutants were inside them. But the actual sort of death squad Daleks, I think they were called, they were seen to just be there to kind of kill all the impure Daleks and then leave again. But then also, once they found out it was the Doctor, they wanted to destroy the Earth with Jack Robertson, and it was kind of all a little bit of a mishmash of ideas, I think, to an extent. So I think I kind of feel when we dig a little deeper that the plot is reasonably kind of thin. I like the idea. It is great to see this I think Chris Chibnall in many ways writes the Daleks really well, a lot better arguably than Stephen Moffat did, or just knows how to better utilise them in stories that make them as a threat, as well as sort of creating some interesting ideas. And so certainly the Dalek mutant that takes over Leo is a really cool character, and just the way, you know, he has the phone call to his wife, and then he sort of puts the phone down and then says "love you, bye," but in a Dalek voice. That was such a creepy, effective sort of way of doing it, and showing how, and I think it's just a thing that we haven't sort of really seen previous, you know, writers kind of utilise the Daleks in that way, and I really, really like that. And so showing that even like one cell of one dead Dalek mutant can be used to create a whole Dalek army or Dalek mutant army, and utilise the defence drones, sort of creating the defence drones as well. Basically just does everything off the back of one cell of a dead Dalek. Like, that shows the power they have and the strength they have, which I think is a really, really effective way of doing it. Albeit then the Death Squad Daleks turn up and destroy them all, so it kind of shows that they are only so good. They're not as good as the real Daleks, I guess. But also that the Death Squad Daleks weren't really clever enough to think, maybe actually we could utilise these guys, where they're just obsessed with, they're impure, they must be like perfect Daleks, which is just a running theme for many episodes of Doctor Who in the past. I don't really feel like that's particularly covering any new ground, because it is, you know, lots of times, even way back to 2005 and, you know, Parting of the Ways, we had the whole, you know, these are impure Daleks because they were sort of using parts of humans or something like that, and, you know, they were all complaining about blasphemy and all those kind of things. That's always been an issue for them, and so it's not like we're treading new ground in this story, but it also does make sense within the plot because of the kind of traits we know about the Daleks. I think my probably biggest criticism from the plot side of this story is how quickly it's resolved. We sort of go from, within a couple of minutes, it's, you know, the Earth is being threatened, the Death Squad Daleks have just found out that it's the Doctor that's behind everything. They want to go and I think they want to, with Jack Robson's help, Jack Robson wants to sell out the Earth basically, and let the Daleks destroy them all and take over the Earth. And then 2 minutes later, the Daleks are all dead. They're all trapped inside the other TARDIS and disintegrated into the void, and that's it. They're all gone. The end. It just felt like it was quite a rushed, sort of quick exit. The very, you know, the sort of Jack escaping with the vortex manipulator and blowing up the Dalek ship. There's most of the Daleks gone. The other ones that are left over, let's just chuck them in the other TARDIS, get rid of them as well. Maybe for me, it just felt very kind of rushed. Given it's quite a long episode, there was a lot of build-up. The build-up was really, really interesting, as you're building up to understanding what these defense drones are, where they've come from, then introducing the Death Squad Daleks again, the good old bronze Daleks. It was just then wrapped up really, really quickly. There was so many sort of good moments in there. You know, the stuff when the defense drones became real Daleks and started just going around killing people. The really quite creepy moment when they shoot the Prime Minister and then look down the camera and say, "We're the masters of Earth," I think along the lines of looking straight into camera. That was just a great moment, like they've ascended and become the government of the United Kingdom. It was pretty crazy, and I really, really enjoyed seeing that. And there were some great moments like that, the utilisation of, you know, sort of BBC News, and I like the little moment with Robertson on Newsnight at the end of the story as well. Just these little things that kind of hark back to the Russell T Davies era in some degree, in terms of making it feel more kind of real by utilising things we sort of know, like BBC News and things like that, and seeing outside 10 Downing Street. I mean, the amount of times we've seen sort of that over recent years with Brexit and COVID and whatever is a lot, but so I thought that was just quite effectively done there. But then it just kind of felt it was all just dumped so quickly so that we could focus on the emotive moments of Graham and Ryan leaving at the end, which was really important. And as I'll come on to talk about, I think that's some of the strongest parts of this story, but it felt like the plot kind of took a bit of a back step to an extent and was just wrapped up so quickly towards the end, which was, I think, a little bit of a shame. So that kind of sums up the plot of this story. We might as well focus on some of the returning characters. Let's go with Jack Robertson first, because why not? He's probably the less important one. He turned up again. I mean, they kind of just said, yeah, he kind of got a bit badly hit by the spider thing, and therefore he was not going to be president, at least before the episode, or sort of at the start of the episode. He's just trying to make a load of money, is essentially what he's doing by creating these defense drones. That's really it. I kind of guessed that was roughly the plot then they were going to go down with him. But then he's very much a guy who just sells himself out to whoever the sort of, you know, the best candidate to be with is, literally. He's like, I'll go and side with the Daleks now because, you know, they've got a better chance of, you know, making me more powerful, basically. I guess his kind of in his mind is, you know, Daleks take over the Earth, then I can come and rule the Earth after that sort of thing, even though that clearly would never work. And then he wants to try and side back with the Doctor at the end as well. He's sort of just jumping ship whenever it sort of suits him. So I did quite enjoy his character, I have to say. It was quite fun. And, you know, every time a new sort of member of the fam turned up to meet Jack, and you just knew he was going to be despairing because, you know, they've come again to try and foil him, and he's just like, what is even going on? I did actually genuinely quite enjoy his character in this story. It was a bit odd that he just had no consequences at the end. The Doctor was just like, didn't do anything, and then suddenly he's on Newsnight praising how he saved the Earth, basically. I assume that's going to set him up for another return in the future, which I wouldn't hate either, because I think he did do it was a reasonably good sort of appearance, frankly, so I wouldn't mind if he did that again. But yeah, I felt very much like him sort of not having any consequences at the end and becoming a saviour. Maybe he'll become the president, or president of the Earth, maybe president of the world, president of the US at least. You do wonder whether that's going to sort of lead to a third appearance in the future, and I wouldn't mind that too much. Now let's talk about the other Jack, of course, Captain Jack, who returned in this story as well. And Captain Jack was a bit of a weird one. Like, I was really pleased that he actually had character, unlike in Futures of the Judoon, where he was basically just reading off cliches of his previous life and not really doing anything. In this story, he did at least kind of feel like a much more defined, real character with good dialogue, like properly written. My main problem with him was it felt like we'd gone magically turned back to 2007, and suddenly he was just one of those characters that sometimes turns up in the show, is kind of a side character, and then just randomly leaves. And that was kind of how it played out, rather than it being any sort of a big thing. Oh wow, Captain Jack is back for an actual proper episode with the Doctor and everything. I mean, it was a nice moment when they met in the prison. I liked that, as using that as a plot line to get her out of the prison. But it just felt like he never really was maybe as important as he could have been, maybe should have been. I don't know. It's very debatable as to how important you think Captain Jack's role should have been in the story. But I just felt like he didn't necessarily have all that much to do, because he kind of became the fourth companion for a lot of this story, which I didn't really feel like maybe suited his character, because he's kind of developed so much and become so much of a bigger thing kind of through his time. Sure, in 2006 that would have worked, but not nowadays, I think, so much. It's by no means was I unhappy with him being in the episode or his role. I think it was still fun and enjoyable to watch. I just feel like there was maybe more that could have been done with his character. I can see some of the reasoning behind having him, and some of the stuff that was written was really, really nice, particularly sort of his scene with Yaz when they were heading to, I think it was Japan, wasn't it? And, them just discussing what it's like to be left behind by the Doctor, basically, and how it sort of feels. I thought that was really, really effectively done, really able to utilise the parallels of what Jack sort of felt after the Series 1 finale versus what Yaz had felt going into this episode. I thought that was a really clever way to utilise him, even if he wasn't kind of that involved in a lot of the story elements. And the main thing, the biggest criticism, quite frankly, I have of Captain Jack in the story was his exit was just bizarre. Like, he was suddenly there in one scene, and then he was just gone, and it was a quick phone call to the Doctor, oh yeah, let's drop a Tortured reference in with Gwen Cooper, which was great, but also, it was just a shame that he didn't actually get a visual goodbye. I guess that's maybe because they wanted to focus on Ryan and Graham's exit much more than focusing on Captain Jack, and presumably just setting him up to kind of return again at some point in the future. I'd be amazed if he doesn't return, even maybe not in the next series, but certainly at some point in the near future, because they clearly left it very open that, he's gone off because he's going to come back again soon, is what it felt like to me. But it was just a little bit of a shame that he didn't at least get a proper saying goodbye to the Doctor, even if he did have some good moments throughout the story with the Doctor, which I was a little bit worried about beforehand. So now in many ways I think the biggest aspects of the story to focus on is kind of the fam and the way they were written, the way they kind of interacted throughout the story. And I think that this was probably, for me, the biggest strength about this story, for once in the Chris Chibnall era, is the emotional scenes, the emotive moments, the kind of big moments between the fams, the kind of, having real sort of good conversation, good sort of discussing their struggles and things. And of course the Ryan and Graham exit at the end as well. But I think for so often I feel like these sort of scenes have let down stories in the past, in the Chris Chibnall era. Sort of scenes like with Ryan and his Standing Resolution, they felt like they just slowed the story to a halt and just were not that good. And they're just other episodes where I felt they haven't really clicked. They felt a little bit cringy at times, some of the dialogue and some of the discussion between them. Whereas in this story, it just felt for the first time it really came together. I was really buying into it. I really just believed in the relationship and the connections, the struggles that they had sort of as characters. Seeing Yaz not being able to deal with being away from the Doctor for so long, being left there, you can tell that she's basically in love with the Doctor. Like, that's pretty clear. And that's why, she was so hard hit by her not being there for 10 months, desperately sort of living in the TARDIS, desperately trying to find a way back to her, then being so angry when she turns up again 10 months late, and just the emotion we see from her throughout this story sort of so strongly implying the kind of further development of that relationship that's going to build in Series 13, I think. Because we didn't really see it too much in Series 12, it was kind of hinted at, but never really kind of so overtly shown, whereas in this story you really felt like Yaz is totally dependent on the Doctor. She's in love with her, essentially, but totally dependent on her, and so if that, I feel like maybe we'll get a Dr. Clara scenario where that backfires on her at some point when it's time for her character to leave. But that's certainly going to be more explored, I think, as a relationship in Series 13. It's a really interesting dynamic there that I think has a long way to go as well, and I think that can really be explored in an interesting way. What this story tackled in many ways better than I was expecting was kind of the events of the Timeless Children for the Doctor. Sort of her and kind of focusing on the fact that her being thrust into a self-isolation prison for years and years on end, straight after she's just learnt the fact that her whole story of her life is a lie, was quite something a bit hard to deal with, quite frankly. And so we really see the fallout of that. And I think that's really that scene with her and Ryan in particular was one of my favourite scenes that I can remember from ages in Doctor Who. Like, it was so well written, so well performed. We'd suddenly got wise old Ryan for some reason, a little bit out of nowhere, but it's fine, we'll roll with it. And just trying to kind of get the Doctor to open up about how she's feeling, about how she's had to deal with the situation, what exactly happened, and how she's coping with it, and showing that ultimately she isn't really coping with it, and that she tries to tell the world, oh, I'm the Doctor, that's who I am, kind of just push it aside. But I like that sort of by the end of the time as children, she's like, oh, it doesn't matter who I was before or who I am, it's just about being the Doctor, we're all the same, blah 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 blah. Yes, she can say that in moments, but that's not something that gets her through every second, every minute of every day. Like, she can't always deal with the fact that her life is a lie and she doesn't know who she is. And I think that's so important to not just brush that aside, but to actually give that some real focus in the story. And we saw that again. I think that's going to be a continuing plot line, particularly if they go more into exploring sort of what happened in her past and what really is all going on there. I feel like that's something that can be tackled in the future, and we'll see the Doctor really struggle with that and really add a real depth to her character even more, I sense. And this episode also for me with the Doctor rammed home her a character trait that I don't think we've seen that much with previous Doctors, which is her social awkwardness. It's really interesting to me, this sort of thing that was introduced a little bit more in Series 12. I think maybe throughout her tenure, but particularly in Series 12, there are a few moments where she didn't really know what to say. She doesn't really say the right thing to comfort somebody in an emotional moment or things like that. And I just felt that really, really came across in this story, where particularly with that scene with Ryan again, where she's sort of changing the subject, just saying kind of slightly odd, awkward things, because she doesn't really know how to kind of interact in a normal, comfortable way. She doesn't really have that trait in her as a character. She's very awkward. She's very, uncomfortable in deep conversations about emotions and how people feel, and so she tries to sort of dodge questions or say kind of weird things. And I just thought that was a really interesting character trait of the Doctor that we have now. I can't really feel like has been sort of explored in quite that way before, and I'm looking forward to seeing that kind of more explored in the future, really. I feel like that could particularly play into the 13 Yaz relationship, particularly if 13 were to show any feelings towards Yaz, as it were, 10 Rose style, whether she can actually express them in such a way that it can kind of go anywhere, whether the whole, there's a whole debate there about whether the Doctor should have a romantic relationship or not, but I don't want to go into that in this video. Maybe that's one for another time. But I just think this social awkwardness kind of character trait that's been introduced is something that can be really explored and really utilised very effectively, and just showed sort of how she was in that sort of final scene when Ryan and Graham were saying goodbye. She's really trying to hold back her emotion. Like, she really needs to be supported by these people around her, because she's got so many kind of internal struggles and things that she can't express because she's a bit awkward in that way and just doesn't know how to say these things. And so she's suddenly losing kind of 2/3 of the sort of support that she's got, and so she's so desperately trying to self-contain herself and hold herself together in the midst of the kind of pure emotion that she's feeling of sadness and despair and loss and not being able to cope with it. And so I feel like these are just fascinating character traits that we haven't sort of seen in a while from the Doctor. I think Capaldi's Doctor was quite different. He definitely felt the sort of emotion of it, like we saw that with Clara, certainly. But I think it's just a kind of slightly different dynamic now, and I'm really interested to see how that's further explored in, hopefully, Series 13. And so I felt it was important for the last word, the sort of final thought for the story, would be with Ryan and Graham and their exit from the show. And I think that actually this is one of the best well executed exits for companions that we've ever really seen in Doctor Who, certainly in recent years. I think the thing is that a lot of people kind of have, either thought that they weren't very good companions because they weren't that involved or weren't that significant, or they were great because of that. And it's sort of this weird dynamic of as fans, people want a companion that's sort of really got some, does a lot, is really involved, has some big emotional weight behind them, then maybe has a big dramatic exit. But they also don't want somebody who's too important, like Clara was, for example, or people would feel that Clara was, for example. And so I feel like I've read from Clara a lot in this series. It's just because I've watched Series 9 recently. So she's in my mind as a companion to kind of compare to. And yeah, Ryan and Graham are very much less, I guess you'd say, less important in terms of the impact on the Doctor's whole life than Clara was. But in terms of the impact that they've had on the 13th Doctor and the way she's kind of lived her life, they've been huge. They've been such a support to her, as I've just discussed. And so I just think that it works so effectively to have them just decide, my journey is done. Not that I'm desperate to stay with the Doctor forever and I can't deal with leaving, so I'm going to die rather than leave kind of vibes. Ryan realised that, he's changed as a person. He's developed and improved as a person through the time that he spent with the Doctor, but that now he's reached that point where he feels like he's kind of gone as far as he can with her. and he's enjoyed his time, but he's ready to kind of settle back into a more normal life now. He's not desperate for the adventure forever because he's got nothing else. He's happy to be living on the Earth. Yes, Ryan and Graham are probably going to go off and have a little of their adventures of their own and things like that, and that was really cool, a really cool idea. But ultimately, Ryan's reached that point. But by the Doctor leaving, basically, it's helped him reach that point of realising that actually he's happy on Earth, he enjoys being on Earth, that's where he wants to be. And I thought that was just such a more real response, maybe a more real way for a companion to leave than just being desperately strung to the Doctor and can never leave and has to die instead. It was a more real, I've enjoyed this, it's great, there's so many planets to explore, it's awesome, but there's adventures to be had on Earth as well, and that's something I want to explore more. And it's the first time really since Martha that companions have just kind of left of their own accord rather than being forced. And I just thought that was such a great moment to see that and work so effectively. And then seeing Graham decide as well that, the TARDIS wouldn't be fun anymore without Ryan because it's his grandson. He's got such an affection and a connection to him that, he wants to spend all his time. He's getting older and he wants to spend all the time he can with his grandson, not, travelling off with the Doctor, as amazing as that is. Obviously, if Ryan had stayed, Graham 100% would have stayed. We sort of saw that set up a little bit when, he was talking about how they're bad boys when they were on the Dalek ship, putting all the bombs in place and things, and how much he does enjoy being on the TARDIS, but also that, he wants to be with Ryan more than he wants to be with the Doctor, I think is the way to put it. And so he doesn't want to miss that opportunity to spend time with him, and so he decides it's time for him to leave as well. And I just thought that was so well written, so well acted, just hit all the emotional beats so well throughout that scene. You could tell that Yaz and the Doctor were so sad to see them leave. The Doctor kind of trying desperately to kind of prolong it by giving them psychic papers and then giving them all a big hug and just kind of putting all their heads together and thing. That scene that moment where they put their heads together and the camera shots looking up from below at them is just perfect. It just so perfectly sort of portrayed the emotion of that moment and how hard-hitting it is that this is the final time we're going to see the real fam together, that's it, they're gone now. And I just thought it was all so perfectly done. It really just hit all the right notes for me. It was so effective. Probably one of the best scenes of the Chris Chibnall era, if I'm not, wanting to put too much hyperbole into it. But I just can't rate that high enough as an exit. It didn't need to be a big dramatic, I'm going to save the Earth, but I'm going to try and save the Earth, but I'm going to die in the process, or, get sucked into a parallel universe, or think that wasn't their story. That wasn't what they needed. They were just a grandson and a grandfather who the grandson's decided he's ready to leave and the grandfather wants to spend the time with him. That was it. It was as simple as that, and I love that Doctor Who doesn't always have to be as big and dramatic as that, as some companion departures. I think that this was just such a nice change of pace to have with the show, and something that I really, really appreciated. And then to top it off, it was just perfect, I think, to come back to where the story, this whole era began on that hill with Ryan trying to learn how to ride a bike with, well, what was Graham and Grace at the time, but now with just Graham. I just thought that was such a perfect way to sign it off, that he's still trying, he's still going to keep on trying to do it. And, that all they've come, they've still gone back up there. Grace isn't there anymore, sadly, but Graham and Ryan can do that together and discussing going off on adventures and sort of searching out these sort of evil plots that are going on because they've got the psychic paper now. That's such a cool idea as well. It was just such a perfect moment for me, I think, a way to end their time on the show. I don't think it could have been done better, quite frankly. In many ways, I wouldn't be surprised if they did turn up again at some point, because, of course, they haven't been killed off, they haven't been trapped in a parallel universe, nothing bad has happened to them, so it's entirely possible that they can come back for an episode in the future. And it wouldn't surprise me if, certainly for like 13's final episode, whenever that comes, I'm sure they'll turn up for at least a small appearance, but maybe they'll join together for one last adventure or something in the future. I think that it's nice that that's been opened up for them, but also that they have made that decision. They're not going to have trouble with the Doctor again, that they are settled on Earth now, and that's what they want to do. And yeah, I just think that really was such a great way to write their characters out. So this video's gone on a bit, sorry guys, but I just thought there's quite a lot to talk about, and I really wanted to kind of unpack it in depth a little bit more than certainly that I did in the reaction yesterday, for example. And so this story, I think, as I feel it works mostly in its emotive aspects, in terms of, the conversations between Jack and Yaz, between the Doctor and Ryan, about sort of, the struggles that they've had and the challenges they face, and then, of course, as I say, the exit scene for Ryan and Graham. I think they're the moments where this story really shines, maybe that bit more than the more advertised sort of part of the story, which was the Dalek plotline. It's great to see a Dalek story, it's great to see lots of Daleks on screen, Daleks killing people, that's all great, that's exciting, it's what we love about the show, but I think ultimately the plot was taking a back step, a secondary step to kind of giving Ryan and Graham the exit they deserved, really giving the focus on the sort of fallout from Timeless Children, the fallout of the Doctor being away for 10 months, all of those aspects. I think that they were kind of made a little bit secondary, were made the focus rather than the plot, and I think that worked to the story's credit, even if for some people, maybe casual fans who just wanted to see a big, crazy, epic adventure with loads of Daleks in it. There was an element of that, but also there was the more emotive moments, and I think that for the first time in the Christian era, that's the bit that really worked more than the plot. So yes, it was a very good story. I don't know whether it was one of my favourite episodes of the Christian era. It's definitely up there with some of the better ones. I'll need to watch it a few more times before I can give a full kind of opinion on where it ranks, but it's pretty good, I think. One of the much better ones with a really strong exit and ending to the story as well. So guys, as I said at the start, please do tell me your comments, your thoughts down below. Maybe you're reacting to some of the things I've said in it as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it and just have a general discussion about it all. It's always really fun to do that. So guys, please do hit the like button, the subscribe if you're new here, and I'll be back again very soon for a brand new video. Goodbye.